Daniel Moretti had built his life on silence, power, and fear, but on that particular morning, none of those things could steady his hands. The city outside his penthouse window moved as it always did, unaware of the war inside him. He stood alone, staring at his reflection, no longer the sharp, dangerous man newspapers once whispered about. Age had traced its lines across his face, not with weakness, but with memory. Years ago, he had everything, money, loyalty, influence, but he had lost the only things that ever truly mattered. His ex-wife, Grace, had walked away not in anger, but in exhaustion. She had begged him to choose peace, to choose their daughter, Ava, over the world he ruled. He did not listen. He believed he could protect them while remaining who he was. He was wrong. That mistake followed him every day like a shadow that never faded. When Daniel learned about Grace's birthday celebration, the information reached him the way most things still did, quietly, through people who feared him even now. The party was nothing grand, no luxury hotel or private club, just a small community hall decorated by friends and neighbors. That detail struck him deeply. Grace had rebuilt her life without excess, without danger, without him. Daniel felt no anger toward that truth, only a slow, aching respect. He did not want to interrupt her life or reopen wounds. Yet something inside him refused to stay away. He told himself he only wanted to see them once, to know they were safe, happy, and untouched by the darkness he left behind. For the first time in decades, Daniel chose to hide instead of command. He put aside his tailored suits and expensive watches and dressed like a common worker, simple clothes, worn gloves, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. The disguise was not meant to fool the world, it was meant to protect his heart from breaking completely. As he arrived at the hall, carrying boxes of decorations, no one recognized him. No one feared him. And for a strange moment, that anonymity felt heavier than any crown he had worn. It stripped him of power and left him only with feeling. Inside the hall, the air smelled of cheap flowers and fresh paint. Laughter echoed off the walls, warm and genuine. Daniel moved quietly, placing chairs, hanging lights, blending into the background. Then he saw her. Grace stood near the center of the room, speaking with friends, her face glowing with a calm strength he did not remember from their marriage. She looked lighter now, as if the weight of his world no longer rested on her shoulders. Daniel's chest tightened. This was the woman he once promised to protect, yet she looked strongest without him. That truth hurt, but it also gave him a strange peace. Maybe leaving was the only way he ever protected her. Then his eyes found Ava. She was no longer the little girl who used to wait by the window for him. She had grown into a confident young woman, laughing freely, helping others decorate the room. Daniel watched her movements carefully, memorizing every detail like a man afraid of forgetting. She smiled the way Grace used to, with kindness that came easily. In that moment, Daniel felt hope, not the selfish hope of reclaiming what he lost, but the quiet hope that his absence had allowed something good to grow. No one spoke to him beyond simple requests. Can you move that table? Please fix those lights. Each word reminded him how invisible he had become, and yet how close he was to the life he abandoned. He wanted to speak, to say her name, to hear his daughter call him father again, but he stayed silent. Love, he realized, was not always about presence. Sometimes it was about restraint. He had destroyed enough by refusing to step back before. Tonight, he would not repeat that mistake. As the room filled with guests and music began to play, Daniel stood against the wall, watching Grace laugh, watching Ava dance, and for the first time in years. His heart felt something other than regret. It felt hope, not loud or demanding, but fragile and honest. He knew this moment could not last. He knew the past could not be undone. But standing there in disguise, unseen and unfeared, Daniel Moretti understood something that power had never taught him. Even from the shadows, love could still exist, and sometimes, that was enough to keep a broken man standing. As the evening moved forward, the hall slowly filled with voices, music, and the soft rhythm of happiness that Daniel Moretti had not felt in years. He remained in the background, doing small tasks no one noticed, wiping tables, adjusting chairs, carrying empty plates to the side. Every simple action felt heavy because each step kept him close to a life that was no longer his. The birthday celebration grew louder and warmer, yet inside Daniel, a cold silence spread. Watching Grace laugh among her friends was like looking at a beautiful picture he once owned but could never touch again. Her laughter was not forced or polite, it was real, and that reality hurt him more than her anger ever could have. He realized she had healed without him, and that truth pressed against his chest like broken glass. Daniel's eyes followed Ava constantly, not out of fear, but out of instinct. He noticed how she spoke with confidence, how people listened when she talked, how kindness seemed natural to her. She was strong, and he knew exactly where that strength came from. It came from nights Grace stayed awake working and worrying, from mornings she faced the world alone, from years of explaining an absence without poisoning a child's heart. Daniel had been powerful once, but that power had done nothing for the two people he loved most. Standing there unseen, he felt smaller than he ever had in his life. The criminal world once bowed to him, yet here, in this simple hall, he was nothing more than a shadow holding his regrets. At one point, Ava accidentally dropped a box of decorations near him. Without thinking, Daniel bent down to help her pick them up. Their hands brushed for a second, and the warmth of that brief contact sent a sharp pain through him. She smiled at him politely and thanked him, her eyes filled with the same kindness he remembered from her childhood. She did not recognize him. That single moment broke something inside him. He turned away quickly, afraid his face would betray him. Years of discipline could not control the tears that threatened to rise. To be forgotten by enemies was survival, but to be forgotten by his own daughter felt like punishment he could never escape. As the celebration continued, Daniel overheard conversations he was never meant to hear. Friends spoke about how hard Grace's life had been after the divorce, about the nights she cried in silence, about the strength it took to raise Ava alone while protecting her from the truth of her father's world. No one spoke of Daniel with hatred, they spoke of him with distance, as if he were a storm that had passed and left damage behind. That absence of anger hurt even more, because it meant Grace had moved on not with bitterness, but with acceptance. Daniel realized that pain was not something that faded with time, it simply changed shape. His had become quieter, heavier, and far more personal. When the cake was brought out and the lights dimmed, the room grew still. Candles flickered softly as everyone gathered around Grace. She closed her eyes to make a wish, her face calm and hopeful. Daniel watched from the corner, holding his breath as if his presence might somehow disturb the moment. He wondered what she wished for. Peace, perhaps. Stability. A future untouched by fear. He knew one thing for certain, he was not part of that wish. And for the first time, he accepted it fully. As applause filled the hall and music rose again, Daniel felt the pain settle deep within him. Not as anger or jealousy, but as understanding. Love had survived without him, and that realization cut deep, yet it also reminded him why he had come in disguise. This night was not about him. It was about facing the consequences of who he had been and learning to stand quietly with the pain he earned. The celebration was reaching its most joyful point when everything shifted in a way no one expected. Music filled the hall, people clapped along to the rhythm, and for a brief moment, the room felt light and complete. Daniel stood near the side exit, ready to leave quietly once the night ended, telling himself that watching from a distance was enough. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Near the stage, a man who had been drinking heavily lost his balance. At first it seemed harmless, just a stumble, but within seconds the situation turned dangerous. He fell forward, crashing into a table, sending glasses and plates shattering across the floor. Panic spread quickly. People screamed, chairs scraped backward, and the music stopped abruptly, leaving only confusion and fear hanging in the air. Ava was standing too close. Daniel saw it instantly. She slipped as someone bumped into her, her foot sliding toward the broken glass and the edge of a fallen table. Time seemed to slow in a way Daniel knew too well, the same way it had during moments of violence in his past life. But this time, his body moved not with aggression, but with protection. He rushed forward, grabbing Ava and pulling her away just as she was about to fall. He shielded her with his own body, feeling glass cut into his arm as he turned her safely aside. At the same time, he shouted clear, firm instructions, his voice calm but commanding, telling people to step back and give space. Without realizing why, everyone listened. The chaos slowly settled, replaced by stunned silence. Grace watched all of this unfold with wide eyes. That voice, that presence, that instinctive authority. It was impossible to ignore. She stepped closer, her heart pounding as she looked at the man holding her daughter. When Daniel turned to check if Ava was hurt, his face was fully exposed under the bright lights. The disguise no longer mattered. Grace recognized him instantly. Years of buried memories rushed back in a single breath. The room seemed to disappear around them as their eyes met. No words were spoken, but everything that had been left unsaid over the years stood between them, heavy and undeniable. Ava looked from her mother to Daniel, confusion slowly turning into realization. She noticed how Grace's hands trembled, how her voice softened when she whispered his name. Daniel. That single word changed everything. Ava stepped back slightly, her mind racing as pieces began to fit together. The man who had just protected her, the stranger who felt strangely familiar, was the father she had grown up hearing about but never truly known. Daniel released her gently, taking a step back as if afraid to cross a line he no longer had the right to touch. His eyes were filled not with pride, but with fear, fear of rejection, fear of causing pain, fear of being too late. The guests stood quietly, unsure of what they had just witnessed. No one understood the full weight of the moment except the three of them. Daniel's arm was bleeding slightly, but he did not notice. His focus was on Grace and Ava, standing before him like a life he once held and lost. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. In that silence, the truth was clear. He had not planned to reveal himself. He had not come to be seen. Yet in one unplanned moment, instinct had stripped away his hiding place and exposed the man beneath the legend. Daniel Moretti was no longer a shadow or a memory. He was a father standing face to face with the consequences of his past, and there was no turning back now. The silence after the chaos felt heavier than the noise that had come before it. Guests slowly began to step back, giving space, sensing that what was happening no longer belonged to the celebration. Grace took Ava's hand instinctively, her body positioned slightly in front of her daughter, a protective habit built over many years. Daniel noticed this immediately, and it hurt more than the glass cutting his skin. It reminded him that protection had been Grace's role alone for a long time. He lowered his head, not in shame alone, but in respect for the life she had built without him. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, stripped of authority and pride. He apologized, not for arriving, not for the scene, but for the years of silence, fear, and absence that had shaped their lives. Grace listened without interrupting. Her expression was guarded, yet there was no anger in her eyes, only exhaustion and caution. Daniel did not defend his past or explain his crimes in detail. He simply accepted responsibility, saying he had believed power could protect love, and it had taken everything from him instead. He admitted that he never stopped watching from afar, never stopped caring, but knew that caring from a distance was the only safe choice at the time. Ava listened quietly, emotions crossing her face one after another. When she finally asked why he never came back, Daniel did something he had never done before in his life. He knelt down in front of her, lowering himself so his eyes met hers without authority or distance. He told her the truth in simple words, that he was afraid of hurting her more by staying, and that leaving was the hardest and weakest choice he ever made. Outside the hall, under the cool night air, the conversation continued. Daniel explained that long before this night, he had begun stepping away from the world that defined him. He spoke about closing businesses, breaking ties, and choosing a quieter life, where violence no longer followed his name. He did not ask for forgiveness or another chance. He only wanted Grace and Ava to know that the man standing before them was not the man who left years ago. Grace remained cautious, reminding him that change was not proven by words or sudden hero moments. Daniel accepted this without protest. For the first time, he did not try to control the outcome. He offered space, time, and honesty, even if it meant losing them again. Before leaving, Daniel made one final choice that defined his redemption. He did not stay to explain himself to the guests or reclaim any place in their lives that night. He walked away on his own, leaving Grace and Ava together, showing through action that their safety and comfort mattered more than his need to be understood. As he disappeared into the darkness, Daniel felt something unfamiliar yet peaceful settle inside him. Redemption, he realized, was not about being forgiven or admired. It was about choosing what was right, even when it cost him everything. Time passed quietly after that night, not with dramatic changes, but with small, careful steps that slowly reshaped lives. Daniel Moretti did not return with grand gestures or sudden appearances. He respected the distance Grace had asked for and focused instead on proving his change through consistency rather than words. He settled into a modest life, working anonymously and using his remaining resources to support community programs that helped families, children, and people trying to escape violent paths like the one he once walked. There were no headlines, no recognition, and no fear attached to his name anymore, and for the first time, that absence felt like freedom. He carried the memory of that night with him as both a warning and a guide, reminding him that real strength lived in patience and humility. Grace watched from afar, cautious but observant. She noticed that no trouble followed Daniel, no rumors reached her door. And no threats shadowed Ava's life. Slowly, she allowed limited contact, not out of obligation, but because Ava asked honest questions that deserved honest answers. Their meetings were simple and careful, often in public places, filled with quiet conversation rather than emotion. Daniel never pushed for more. He listened more than he spoke, learning who his daughter had become instead of trying to reclaim the years he missed. Ava, in turn, began to understand that her father was not a story of fear, but a human being shaped by choices and consequences. Months later, when Ava's birthday arrived, Grace made a decision she never thought she would. She invited Daniel to attend, not in secret and not in disguise, but openly and clearly, with boundaries that protected everyone involved. Daniel arrived early, dressed simply, his presence calm and respectful. There was no tension in the room this time, only quiet awareness. He watched Ava smile, watched Grace stand confidently beside her, and felt gratitude instead of regret. He did not try to reclaim the past or rewrite history. He focused on the present, understanding that trust grows slowly when it is built honestly. As the celebration ended, Daniel stood aside, content with what the day had given him. Grace thanked him for respecting her boundaries, and Ava hugged him without fear or hesitation. In that moment, Daniel understood the true lesson of his journey. Power fades, fear disappears, and control means nothing in the face of genuine love. What remains is the warmth created when people choose accountability over pride and patience over demand. The story did not end with a perfect reunion or a repaired marriage, but with something far more real, a broken man learning how to be present without harm, and a family discovering that even after deep loss, something good can still grow.